Hello and welcome to Weekly MTG. I'm your host, Blake Rasmussen, but the person you're here to see today who's going to have tons of information, not all the information, because we're going to hold a little bit back, but tons of information about the world building of the upcoming Aetherdrift set. We've got Miguel Lopez. Miguel, welcome.
Hey Blake, hey everyone.
This show is mostly going to be Miguel talking. There's going to be a bunch of cool art. We're going to learn a lot about what's going on, at least at the start of Aetherdrift. We're going to reveal the 3 planes that we will be visiting and a bit of information about each of them. And we're just going to kind of talk through all of that. The thing we're not going to do, there will be no preview cards today. I'm setting that out right now. Let's set expectations. This is all about world building. We're going to dive deep-ish into what's going on in Aetherdrift, but no preview cards. Now, before we get to the world building and Miguel doing all the talking, we've got a couple news items. The first one, of course, as we announced last week, so tickets for MagicCon Chicago are now on sale. MagicCon Chicago is happening this February 21 to 23. I'm going to be there. Early bird badges, definitely check those out while supplies last. There's a ton of cool stuff happening at MagicCon Chicago, as with every MagicCon, but the real capper is that we are featuring Dungeons and Dragons this time around. Dungeons and Dragons, if you didn't know, just celebrated their 50th anniversary. And so we're going to join in some of that celebration with D&D Beyond experience, panels, merchandise, all kinds of cool D&D stuff, in addition to the great MagicCon experience that you've come to know and love. So these tickets are on sale now. Head to mtgfestivals.com and you can learn more about what's happening and how to purchase tickets and badges. Additionally, we shared an announcement this morning. I want to read it so that I get it right, about some updates to Spell Table. So Spell Table, for those of you who don't know, really cool program where you can play paper Magic across the internet against other people on your screen. There are a couple updates to Spell Table this week that are intended to combat the recent spam that some players may have encountered. So a few changes. First, players can now have a maximum of 5 active public games per player, and the game card UI will contain all text during the match. Players are now also going to be required to validate their Wizards account before they can create or join a Spell Table game. And then when you block a player in-game, all two-way audio will now be muted. So those are some updates that are happening on Spell Table this week. All right, let's go back to Two Faces. We don't need just me because Miguel, tell the folks at home, why are you an expert on Aetherdrift? What's your role with this set?
Sure. So hello again to everyone at home. My name is Miguel. I am a world building set lead here at Magic the Gathering, which means I work with both the easiest way to say it is I work with both the art and design teams to move our sets from basically like numbers in a spreadsheet and blank squares in our database to all the way to like the final, ideally as seamless product as we can make at the end of it. It's my job to ensure that our art, our mechanics, our story, and our world building all fit together into a cohesive, self-reinforcing, thematic package. And Aetherdrift is, I was trying to do the math. I believe it's my 5th set now.
Okay.
At Magic.
Very cool. Well, let's. I think that's our jumping off point to start talking about Aetherdrift. We've not learned a ton about this set so far. We've heard about the Aetherspark. We know there's a multi-planar death race. We know there are 3 planes. So give us sort of the introductory broad overview of what's going on in Aetherdrift.
Yeah, so broad overview is that Aetherdrift is going to follow the events of the Ghirapur Grand Prix, which is it's billed as the multiverse's premier multiplanar combat sporting event. It's a race. We're going to see it in its second iteration as a multiversal event now that pits teams from across the multiverse against each other in a multi-stage, multi-day, gray legality combat race to be the first across the line to win glory and a valuable prize. That's at least what it is on its surface.
Okay. Now, you called it the Ghirapur Grand Prix. Ghirapur is a place we're familiar with. So talk a little bit more about how did this race start? You said it's the second year. What's the story behind the race?
Yeah, sure. So the Ghirapur Grand Prix, Ghirapur is the capital city of the plain Avishkar. Avishkar, formerly known as Kaladesh, we'll have an article that discusses both like out of character and in character reasonings for why we changed that. Aetherdrift, as I said, depicts the second year of the Ghirapur Grand Prix. The first year was the first time it was multiplanar. It was far more chaotic. It was more of like on the world building side, we were thinking of it as, I believe some of this comes through the story as well. It was more of a test bed for the technologies that we're going to see in this edition of the Ghirapur Grand Prix. Identifying and classifying omen paths, aether transport, broadcasting through omen paths, all of the procedures and practices necessary for a single plane Avishkar to manage large-scale, rapidly changing multiversal efforts across multiple planes from a central location. The race we're going to see in Aetherdrift is like the top division race. You'll see 10 iconic teams in there, but if you really want to nerd out about like the whole structure, as I did, the whole structure of how the event actually works, the Planeswalkers Guide, which will be up later, has a bunch of detail on why you're seeing other teams besides just the 10 iconic. All prior editions of the Ghirapur Grand Prix were local to Avishkar. It existed as an event, not necessarily called the same thing, but as an event prior to Omen Paths opening. This was before Omen Paths opened. It was decidedly illegal. It was run by a counterculture group called the New Culture Collective that the consulate, which was the old government on Avishkar, designated as criminal. The New Culture Collective was a group of engineers and students, laborers, artists, intellectuals, and other citizens of Avishkar who found common ground in their opposition to the consulate. And this sort of like illegal street racing scene was their major recruiting tool. It's what made them cool and appealing to people to join. During the Phyrexian invasion, the New Culture Collective ran aid groups. They ran logistics. They fought against the Phyrexians by putting their couriers and pilots in place to work as scouts and guerrilla fighters, search and rescue responders, things like that. And in doing so, they grew to status of to basically become folk heroes. The invasion ends. The people of the plane, now called Avishkar, are dissatisfied with the consulate. It's been there, that sort of discontent has been simmering since at least Aether. So the New Culture Collective, together with a whole host of Avishkar's rest of population, they unite and they throw off the command of the consulate and install a new People's Assembly. This event called the Indigo Revolution, also covered in a bit in the story and certainly in the Planeswalkers Guide, and now stand as the new the new assembly, the new government of Avishkar.
Now, I do want to back up a little bit. You've said Avishkar a few times. You mentioned the name change. There is, as you said, there's going to be an article on WeeklyMTG kind of talking about the real world work behind that. But this is a change that happens in the story, in the world guide, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So when we head to Avishkar in Aetherdrift, we're going to find a plane that is eager and festive and brimming with a revolutionary hope and potential. We'll see. I discussed a bit about it on talking about how the Ghirapur Grand Prix got started, but we're going to see it's under the command of a People's Assembly. Now the consulate is gone. Ghirapur is still the capital, but this plane is called Avishkar. It's new. Avishkar is. It's in this really difficult and I think really exciting as a world builder, a really exciting place of having to balance sort of the truth and reconciliation process of a post-revolutionary period with local reconstruction and Avishkar's both the government and the people, their knowledge that now they are a plane in the multiverse rather than a single isolated in a single universe, right? So they, in the Omen Path era, Avishkar understands that they are one place in a connected multiverse that is just as full of, yes, enemies and dangers, as we saw in the Phyrexian invasion, but also opportunities and allies. And with this knowledge, the assembly is working quickly. This is the sort of the reason, the hard reason for why this event, the Ghirapur Grand Prix, exists, is because the assembly recognizes that, hey, sport is a powerful tool of soft power. We are not interested, nor do we have the capability to go out and invade and conquer and dominate the multiverse. So what we're going to do is work expeditiously through the use of soft power to insulate Avishkar from outside threats. We're going to ramp up trade. We're going to try to build embassies. We're going to spread our currency, our food, our language, the way people talk about Omen paths on other planes. Well, we want them to use the Avishkari designations for what Omen paths are. The Ghirapur Grand Prix is one of Avishkar's tools that is attempting to spread its influence across the multiverse and protect itself, to make everyone out there their friend, use Avishkari money, and think of you as the sort of indispensable status quo. So that's the state of Avishkar that we're.
So this really is a new era for the plane. After sort of the twin hammers of the Ether Revolt, of the Phyrexian invasion. This is them saying, this is a new era. We are renaming ourselves and then stepping out into the multiverse.
Yeah. Stepping out with an open hands.
All right. So we can talk more about, that's going to form the core of the world building. But there are 3 planes that we visit. 2 additional planes. Where else are we going on this Grand Prix?
Sure. So second, I could try and run, if I remember the story correctly, I'll try and go in order of the planes visited. Hopefully that's not too much of a spoiler, but we'll go to Amonkhet next. That is obviously folks know Amonkhet. Like Avishkar, it's sort of tonally kind of similar to Avishkar in that, like, we the first time we visited Amonkhet, is under the yoke of Nico Bolas, and the second, not the second time, but when we last saw them, they were like every other plane in the multiverse, subject to the brutalities, the terror, and the horror of the Phyrexian invasion. So now, like Avishkar, Amonkhet finds itself in this Omen Path era free in a way that it hasn't been in a long time. So I should say Amonkhet, like Avishkar, is a host and a participant of the race, as you can see in some of the art on the screen there. They too are also in this process of rebuilding. They, like Avishkar, they have a team that participates in the race, and it's a united team of living and undead citizens who are participating not just for the glory and passion of this prestigious race, but also to capture and uplift the hopes and dreams of an Amonkhet that's finally free from oppression, ruin, and war. Amonkhet, it is, to a degree, it is a plane that's beleaguered and battered, but healing. The Luxa is beginning to flow clear. The gods, old, known, and new, are beginning to stir once more with Bolas gone. And what Amonkhet faces now is really an uncertain future, one that holds just as much danger as it does promise, potential ruin as it does potential salvation. There is a whole host of foul forces that are arranged against the United Living and Dead, but they have this opportunity now. The United Amonkhet does, the opportunity and agency to do something about it rather than just submit. So in the meantime, we're seeing them taking a bit of a celebratory breather before beginning the real work of reconstruction.
Okay, and you mentioned Amonkhet is hosting the Grand Prix. Is there is there like an application process for planes to do so? Does it just depend on where the Omen paths are? How does that work?
Yeah, it's the latter. So the Planeswalker's Guide, if I remember correctly, it's a 2-part Planeswalker's Guide that dives into a bunch of the nuances on this. And in there we talk about how the one being playing host to a stage of the Ghirapur Grand Prix, like that's something that happens after the end of a lengthy period of diplomacy and negotiation with Avishkar, tons of agreements, but all of it is predicated upon having a stable omen path. So for as long as omen paths have existed, some are open and do not close. The Avishkari classification systems, they basically call these ones stable omen paths. And there's one that exists between Avishkar and Amonkhet that allows for tons of trade and diplomatic exchange, and even such like frivolous things as a sporting event to happen between the two.
Mm-hmm. All right, what is the third plane we'll be visiting?
So this one is really, really exciting for me personally, because the third plane that we're going to go to is Muruganda. This is Magic's deepest look into Muruganda yet. I, like rather selfishly as a world builder, really use Aetherdrift to establish more truths about the plane that we could pick up on and run with if we ever get to visit it for a full set. This is kicking the can down the road a ways in a really fun and exciting way for me. Muruganda is, to sort of sum it up, I want folks to be able to experience it in the card set, the story, and the guide on their own. But it's a primordial plane, I think, is the way that we described it internally. It's a place where magic and life is raw and young, and extremely powerful, but also extremely dangerous if you're careless. Unlike Avishkar and Amonkhet, Muruganda as a plane isn't taking part in the Grand Prix so much as it's kind of subject to the race. They don't have a team in the race, but they will be present, typically participating as a bit of an outside threat. You'll see things like erupting volcanoes, falling chunks of the moon, and that Muruganda is already known to be famous for. Oozes, dinosaurs. There's a ton to be encountered here. Plenty of art and flavor on the cards for players to start building a higher fidelity picture of this plane. Like I said, tons more in the Planeswalker's Guide when it drops, and so much more that is left on the cutting room floor, but does exist, and I would love to bring to life one day.
Yeah, and then for those who may not have heard of Muruganda before, understand why some people in chat are so excited about it, we've been teasing Muruganda as a plane that exists for a long time. I don't even remember when the first Future Sight, at least, is as far back as I can remember.
Petroglyphs? I'm trying to remember what the
Muruganda
first card was.
Yeah. At any rate, we've named some cards Muruganda. It's been in some flavor text. But yeah, we've never visited. So I know a lot of players are excited to finally see what this looks like. And what kind of challenge was that for you all to build this world that already had some peaks at it over the years?
Yeah, I think there's sort of a twofold challenge in there. One is that thankfully I'm not a designer in the game design. I don't design mechanics of the game, which is really good because I'm really bad at that. But what was difficult is that Muruganda is known for being vanilla, right?
Yep.
It is difficult to world building, and game design has sort of a dialectical circular relationship where mechanics will influence world building and world building will influence mechanics. So it was very much when we found out that we're going to Muruganda, it fell to myself and my art director to sort of define what is that? Because we don't have any mechanical identity to really draw from other than it is vanilla.
Yeah.
it is basic. So we once we sort of cracked the anxiety of that, it just became really fun to be like, okay, what is our most Frank Frazetta primordial plane that we can think of that is explicitly magic in capital M in the brand sense. What are all the coolest things that we would want to do? What is what are the things that are most exciting to us about this plane that also fit within the brief, but that we can bring early on when we're doing early ideation, early concept work for for any set, we always write and draw far more than actually gets used. Merc got a full board treatment, and we're seeing just a very sort of narrow vertical slice of it, but one that shows, I think, some of the things that we're most excited about with the potential, with a plane that is has that sort of like primordial raw magic top line. It's I want to step on my tongue here so I don't over
give too much away.
And that too.
And now we do know. So the Avishkar and Amonkhet, they both had their own cataclysmic events followed by the Phyrexian invasion. We don't know much about Muruganda before this. We do know from a card that it was invaded by Phyrexia. Do we see any of the after effects of that, or what do we see when we get to Muruganda?
We are going to see, so like I said, we're seeing a vertical slice. We're seeing one region of Muruganda that supports, of course, all 5 colors of magic. So we're going to see a pretty diverse and beautiful region of it, beautiful and dangerous. We will encounter some of the, not just like beasts and monsters and flora and fauna of Muruganda, we will encounter some of the peoples of Muruganda, and people. I'm using peoples in a very general sense, and sentient. Yes, the from what I remember from our from sort of at the end of our process, we have a whole creative text process, right? And it involves me as a set lead, along with a whole different team, and we work together to put flavor text and name cards. And if I remember correctly, unless some of those things got cut, we are going to find out more about what the plane's response to the Phyrexian invasion was, and sort of tee up what could be storylines that we pick up and run with if we were to go there again in the future.
Okay. Now, I want to step back to Avishkar a little bit. You talked about the Grand Prix being sort of soft power expansion for the government there and the people there. Other planes have access to the Omen Paths as well. What is it about Avishkar, the people, the government, that enable them to be kind of the first to do something like this?
I think there is there's a theme in a lot of the story and world building for this set that sort of looks at a like revolutionary optimism following catastrophe, right? Most all the sets that have like broad civilizations, nations built across them are in this set are in that sort of period of like, well, the most awful thing has happened, so what do we do next? And Avishkar is in a place where it has command over Aether, which is an incredibly powerful resource. It has a strong already existing industries of invention and massive academies where like curiosity, exploration, all of these things are pushed as like sort of self-sustaining and self-sustaining virtuous impulses, right? So like Avishkar is looking at this as there's a bit of the material which I said earlier, which is like we're a post-revolutionary government that is like still dealing with. There's old consulate members here. There's there's Aether pirates and student groups and revolutionaries. We're like trying to figure out like how we can have our truth and reconciliation process and our rebuilding process, and also handle the the pretty like earth-shaking revelations that there is such a thing as a multiverse out there, right? So it the quickest, cheapest and most powerful tool that they have is, like I said earlier, approaching the multiverse with an open hand, right? They also happen to be at a place where they have a ton of open paths opening up. Some that are like flickering open, some that exist for a long time. It's why some of the teams that we'll see in the race and why the race itself can exist. So they are looking at this and saying, well, we should, we should expand our brand basically as fast and as far as we can. To insulate ourselves from the dangers by making ourselves a friend to everyone.
Yeah.
So it is that leading with that curious, that optimistic, revolutionarily optimistic impulse to say, hey, we all together, the multiverse, we all suffered this. Let's build together. Let's rebuild together. Let's come together. Let's celebrate our victories and then find out, in peace and fellowship a way forward. Also because we don't have, we got to sort out our stuff at home too. So.
You mentioned that this is the second iteration of the race. And you talked a little bit about the first one, but can you dive a little bit more into what that first one was like, what they learned, what the differences are?
Yeah, so one of the teams that that won the first race will not a spoiler. That's why they exist in the second one. We'll see them in this one. There was a bit of without spoiling too much of our development process, or not spoiling, but getting too much into it. We had to have a first race, and we. It was initially going to be much bigger than what we were going to depict, what we wound up depicting in Aetherdrift. So we wanted to explore what with sudden access to a multiverse and the idea of running this. How would a group that doesn't have experience in running a multiversal race try and do it? And our thought is the thing that makes sense is they probably wouldn't nail it the first time. To learn a bunch. So the first race was, instead of going across 3 planes on a tightly controlled circuit, it was, I think, nearly 24 planes. Through omen paths that were stable, through ones that were unstable, with a whole just mess of teams. What Avishkar learned through this is, well, we gotta limit the race so we can ensure, it's a combat sport. We don't want everyone to die or get lost out in the multiverse. So we need to limit the scope to keep it safe for participants, to keep track of our participants, but then also, like I said up top, their interest is proving that Avishkar's interest, the People's Assembly, their interest is in proving that they are capable of being the hub of the multiverse. And a key thing in that is showing that you can make omen paths predictable enough for trade, logistics, and travel, right? To make these things feel like infrastructure that everyone who uses them, maybe they pay tolls to Avishkar. Maybe they use the Avishkar classification system. Maybe they use Avishkari money between different planes, right?
Yeah.
So they basically realized, let's make this thing not just a fun exercise in us exploring everything and being chaotic about it, but let's prove we can make this a system that works. And if it works for a race, it can work for travel and infrastructure. And people can think we're really cool and good and want to sign up with us.
Now, one of the things that we did reveal before this stream is the existence of the Aetherspark. We showed art for it and a preview frame, but we've been pretty light on details. What can you tell us about the Aetherspark and its role in the Ghirapur Grand Prix?
So the Aetherspark is the Grand Prix of the Grand Prix. The Grand Prix. The Grand Prize of the Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Woo! We got there in the end, like many of our teams. So the name sort of spoils what it is, right? It is most likely a Planeswalker Spark or a Spark, whose I obviously cannot say, secured in a super cooled Aether solution housed inside of a very ornate trophy that it functions as a containment unit. What one can do with that, we will have to read the story to find out. But it is, even in the era of Omen Paths, right? We've spent a long time here discussing like how much Avishkar wants to control movement through Omen Paths, right? Through setting up all these systems of logistics and infrastructure and showing that they can do it. Like the ability for one single person to planeswalk wherever they want is not like in the assembly in Avishkar's eyes, it's not really the game changer that it used to be. But it is still like, to all of these teams racing, they all, generally speaking, have reasons for why they would want that, power. And like ultimately, Omen Paths open and close, but having that convenience of being able to go where you want when you want is still like, that's still pretty hard to beat. Yeah. Aetherspark is a treasure that is still worth coveting, and is a nice accolade to put alongside the glory and acclaim for winning the Grand Prix as well.
All right. So we are going to do a Q&A section. I will note, we're very early. Miguel has shared quite a bit of what we're able to share at this point. We're not going to give away story points, plot points, all of that sort of stuff. So the best questions are going to be clarification questions about anything he's shared already. I'll if it's a really good question, I'll throw it up there to see. Miguel knows the story better than I do, so he can pass on it too if he doesn't think that if he thinks it'll give something away. So we are going to do that before we get to the Q&A. So as usual, if you can tag @Magic in the chat, it helps me find it a little bit faster. So go ahead and start throwing your questions in chat. Before we get to that, we do have some important dates coming up for Aetherdrift so that you know when to look for certain things. We'll get that graphic up on the screen here. As that's coming up, there are a couple things going up on dailymtg.com today. So there is going to be the first of a 2-part world building world guide. So that was written by Miguel. So that's going to have a lot of the details that you want. And it's going to share a lot of what he's already shared, but also dive a little bit deeper in a couple places. And then additionally, there's going to be that article on the name change. And that's the main stuff. The Planeswalker's Guide. The Planeswalker's Guide Part 1 is going up today. So let's take a look real quick at the important dates slide, if we could get that up. There it is. All right, so the story is going to kick off on January 14th. We'll have the debut on January 21st, and of course we'll have an after show right here on WeeklyMTG as well to talk about what we just saw. Previews are going to run January 21st through the 31st, and then we're going to go right into the MTG Arena streamer event on February 2nd, followed by pre-release on February 7th, and then February 14th, the Valentine's Day present everyone wanted. Aetherdrift will be available everywhere in the world. All right, let's get to some of those questions. First question, what do we know how long it has been since the invasion when we get to this second Grand Prix?
Yeah, it has been at least 2 years. The specific timeline is always something that's a little fuzzy when we're dealing with current sets that are being built in parallel to each other. But if this is the second edition of the multiplayer Grand Prix, it's been at least 2 years since the Omen Paths opened up.
Okay, so the Grand Prix
right
so far
around
run On a yearly basis. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Thus far. All right. What do we know what the prize was for the first Grand Prix?
I got to keep that one a secret.
Cool.
For a couple reasons, but the short answer is I'm very sorry. I have to keep that a secret.
Okay. Let's see. So I see a couple questions about the makeups of the different racing teams. We're not going to reveal those yet. Let's see. We've got a more general version of this question, so I'll ask this.
Sure.
Can you tell us anything about the 10 teams?
Yeah, of course. Some of them are from places that we visited in Magic's past. Some of them are from places that we've only ever heard of. Think like Muruganda before we revealed it. There's not a team from Muruganda though. And others are from places. So yeah, I'm literally right after this, I'm going to go into the Magic Story podcast and talk all about the 10 teams. So I don't want to step on that too much. But I do want to say one of the very fun things on the world building side that we got to do when designing our 10 teams for this is like a note that we received up top was like, we don't just want to do 10 teams all from known planes and theme them specifically to like what a racing team from X plane would be like, right? So there was an allowance in there for a certain number of teams from areas in the multiverse that we have never heard of before, never visited before, and are totally new to players. And the sort of world building intent behind that was to show off that in this era of Omenpad's opening, the multiverse is so much larger than we have cameras to cover, right? So I think we actually have art from some of them out there already. I don't want to stumble over it just in case I'm wrong. But yeah, what I can say is that we'll have teams from places that we've been, teams from places that we heard of but never been, and then teams. Actually, there we go. That's one of them right there. Teams like the Speed Brood here, from planes that are planes or places that are entirely new to Magic. This is the first time that we'll see them.
All right. I also got another fantastic question that reminds me I skipped an entire section of the stream.
No.
Yeah, well, yeah. There is a rumor of this being 30 packs instead of 36. Yes, it's not a rumor. So producer Sean is going to take us back to the beginning. I skipped an entire graphics package. So we do, yes, we can share a good deal of information about the product lineup for Aetherdrift. So here you can see the product lineup, which we have a lot of known things. We have play boosters, of course. We have collector boosters. There are going to be 2 commander decks. There is a bundle. There's also a finish line bundle, so that's a special bundle that's going to have some special stuff in it. And of course, there are going to be pre-release packs. So this is a fairly normal product lineup plus the special bundle there, which we'll talk more about what can be found in that. The change to 30 packs per play booster box is happening with Aetherdrift. That is going to be a forward-facing change. We've been getting feedback from retailers for quite a while that 36 packs was too many in a box. 30 is closer to the preferred number. We have seen a lot of thoughts on, is this shrinkflation? Is this whatever? The MSRP is based on per pack. So the MSRP per play booster pack does not change. So there is no there is no suggested price change with the pack price. So 30 packs would have an MSRP lower than 36 packs. Yes, that's it. Additionally, there is a box topper for this. So not only is there a buy a box promo, which we are not showing off today because we're not showing off review cards, but there is going to be a box topper additionally in each play booster or any booster box of Aetherdrift. That's the packaging. We're not going to show you what can be in there because it's pretty cool. But we will show you when we get to the debut in January. Okay, thank you for that question, reminding me that I skipped an entire section of the stream.
I got really nervous because I ran out of notes. I was like, cool, hit the Q&A, just do world building stuff. And then you said another section. And
yeah, no, that was my section. That was my section.
Beautiful.
Obviously, right on top of this. So let's see. When will preview cards start? So that was that'll start with the debut on the 21st. Here's sort of an overall question for you, Miguel. How long does world building take with a set like this?
Officially or unofficially? Because officially, it's a period of a few months. The easiest way to think about our world building process is that by the time it hits my desk, we have like 3 broad stages of a set's life. We'll have sort of the early like concept push period where it's basically myself, my art director, and whoever the lead designer for the set is. We more or less lock ourselves in our rooms, our offices, well, rooms for me, and go through a couple months of drafting art rules and world building, working relatively closely together, sort of spinning up from essentially a prompt, the like a core like internal document, it's a world guide, right? Hundreds of pages long, that is tons and tons of text, of concept art, that sort of gives shape to what the set is going to be. The second step is another period of a few months, that is like the actual concepting, where we have a finished world guide and we start. The story is being written kind of in parallel to this process. I'm acting in sort of an editorial capacity over there, as well as leading the card concepting process, where we write hundreds of art briefs for cards. This is also like a living, this is why I said like officially or unofficially, because now we're kind of entering to a degree the unofficial fuzzy zone of world building, where like cards, where art, mechanics, and story are all starting to become real, and in becoming real, we're finding out where things are contradicting each other, where there's friction, where we have to work to sort of shape one of those 3 things to fit the other 2, or 2 of those 3 things, and so on. The final period is when we're in finalization. We're doing at that point like creative text, localization, final touches on the story, hopefully not too many, but sometimes emergency art recommissions, the truly unofficial world building process, where typically, also actually I should say, when a lot of the Planeswalkers guides are being drafted and written, usually we're pulling, if you ever want to know what the world guide looks like, you can read one of my Planeswalkers guides. I tend to pull a lot of the stuff that winds up in the Planeswalkers guides from world guides, and then do a lot of work to update the text, both to flesh out certain sections, because the world guide's a document for artists. It's not necessarily meant for public consumption, so I have to like make the words pretty, and make sure that all the proper nouns match. So sorry, that's a long answer, but the world building officially a period of a few months, unofficially the entire lifetime of the set.
All right. Can you tell us anything about the planes that were raced through in the first race?
Maybe? I don't know. Avishkar is the this is cheating, but Avishkar is the host, so it begins and ends on Avishkar. That we race through. A couple. Oh, actually, I can't tell you what the planes are.
Okay.
But I can tell you that the 10 teams that we're going to see in the set, each of those teams is from one of the planes that was raced through in the first Grand Prix.
All right.
So sorry, but a couple months.
This is a you may or may not know the answer to this one, but I thought it was an interesting piece of trivia. So they said besides Venser and whoever's spark is in the Aetherspark, have there been any other Planeswalker sparks that were isolated and moved around in Magic's history?
There was a discussion in a side story I wrote actually for LCI where Sahili and Watley discussed that as sort of in the wake of the desparking that's happened after the Phyrexian invasion. So that's not the context of that discussion is they're talking about like both of them are planeswalkers, both of them have lost their spark in the wake of that event, and they're discussing what happens when a spark is removed from the body. So that's one that I'm familiar with because again I wrote that story. So, but that doesn't. Yeah, that's kind of. I'm gonna put a pin in it there, and say that's my answer to that.
All right, chat's throwing out a few names. Chat saying Nahiri, Karn, Teferi, kinda.
Oh yeah, of course, Karn.
Slowbad.
Yeah, Brothers War was the first set that I led. Karn was all over that one, along with Urza. So yeah, Karn. I feel silly that I forgot that one.
Well, let's be fair. Karn's history of his Planeswalker spark is complicated.
Yeah, it's been on a journey.
It's been on a journey. Yeah. I am getting a lot of questions about the gods on Amonkhet. Do we know anything about them at this point?
We do. That is a big part of the what I can't say today is covered in exhausting length in the second part of the Planeswalker's Guide, Planeswalker's Guide Part 2 for this set. I believe that's also touched on in, well, by asking the question, if I could, I believe that's also touched on in one of the commander decks as well.
Okay.
The commander decks that we have for this set were a really fun way of looking at what's going on these planes while the race is happening. Check those out if you want to know in detail what's happening with the gods on Amonkhet.
Yep.
The last time we saw the gods on Amonkhet, I believe it was one of the battle cards from March of the Machine that showed the Scarab, Locust, gods, and Hazaret, right? Fighting in Octamoon. You can infer from there that those three are still around. I did also say when talking about Amonkhet that there are gods old, known, and new that are beginning to stir. So rest assured, we deliver on some of those promises or deliver on those promises in Aetherdrift, card set and story and Planeswalker's Guide.
All right.
And it's one of those things, like I should say, last thing for Amonkhet, and I talked a lot about Muraganda, how we did a lot of world building to set up like what could happen if we were to go there in the future. We did the exact same thing for Avishkar and Amonkhet. So like it is our intent that there are tons of hooks in and tons of world building promises in this set for people to like. To be excited about and to look at as like, at least personally, I can't speak for the company, but personally as a world builder, a promise that were I to be in the future assigned a set to return to Amonkhet, just return to Avishkar, like, yeah, I would, or if one of my coworkers on the world building team were, we would pick up and run with those threads.
Cool. Here's a really practical question. Are there cities on Avishkar other than Ghirapur?
Yes, there are. I don't believe we visit them, sort of because of the narrow scope that we had in. We have like 300 cards in a set, right? But we only get so many to actually depict like things that are going on that's not like a high action, high energy moment, right? So we decided to only depict the events of the race as they occur in and around Ghirapur. Yes, Ghirapur is the capital of Avishkar. I believe there are actually, in the world building, there's like 11 kingdoms across Avishkar. Ghirapur is just the capital that unites all of them.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any others appearing in the set, but yes, there are certainly other cities, other locations, other regions on Avishkar that are off camera for now.
All right. I'm seeing a number of questions about sort of the makeups of the set, which we can't really answer. I will note, I've seen some questions on Magic Story Podcast. So Magic Story Podcast, it's available wherever podcasts are available. You can just search for Magic Story Podcast. Miguel is going to be on the Magic Story Podcast, that episode, the one that you referred to where you talk about the racing team. So that one is going to come out on January 13th, so right before the story kicks off. We'll have that podcast going up. But otherwise, if you want to catch up on Magic Story Podcast is a really great way to do that. There are no standard pre-cons with this set. I have seen that question a couple times. The product lineup that we put up earlier is the full product lineup. I'll answer this again because there seems to be some confusion. Did the price of booster displays change if there are now fewer booster packs contained? Okay, couple things. One, we don't control the price of packs. We can do a suggested price. So everything I say is going to be about the MSRP, which is the suggested retail price. That doesn't mean it's the price you're going to necessarily see or pay. That said, when we do MSRP for a given set, we do it based on the pack. So we don't have an MSRP for a box. It is just the math of how many packs multiplied by the MSRP of a pack. So with 30 packs in a box, you multiply 30 times the MSRP of a single play booster, and that is what the MSRP would be of that. And it would be different, obviously, for 36. So we only do MSRP on a per pack basis. So the MSRP would be mathed lower for 30 versus 36. That is that. I hope that makes it clear. Price increases to packs are not coming. We have already put out the MSRP for Aetherdrift. You can find it. It is available. It is not above anything. It's slightly higher than Foundations, but that's because we actually lowered the MSRP for Foundations. Okay. All right. Let's see if we have any other questions. We only have a couple more minutes. Let's see. I see a couple questions again about renaming the plane to Avishkar. If you head to dailymtg.com, there's going to be an Outworld explanation, so sort of a behind the scenes, what the team did, why article going up. That'll be up shortly. May even be up now. Who knows? And then the short version that Miguel shared earlier was basically the plane's been through a lot. They have a new government, a whole new outlook on life. And so they're like, we want a different name. And so they changed it. Right? I summarized that quick.
Yeah. Much more concise than me.
There's a lot more to it, but that's the Q&A version of that answer. Yeah. All right. Do I know if there will be any standard precons coming this year? I have nothing to announce on that at this moment. Will the plane cards from Kaladesh be errated to type Avishkar? As far as I know, we are not changing anything that already exists. So we are not going back and errata anything, changing anything's name. So the answer is no for now, with, of course, we can always change our minds in the future for renaming things. All right. Maybe you can answer this one, but I feel like not. but it's a cool question. How does Niv Mizzet feel about another plane attempting to project some soft power?
That is a very fun question, and one that the People's Assembly on Aetherspark are asking themselves as well.
Okay. All right. I think we're getting into territory where we are going to get a lot of answers like that. So if you do want more, head to dailymtg.com. At the conclusion of this stream, there's going to be a Planeswalker's Guide. It's part 1 of 2. I believe part 2 is going up tomorrow, so it's written by Miguel, so it's going to have a lot of good information in there. Additionally, there is going to be the article on sort of the behind the scenes on the name change to Aetherspark that happened. And then let's put the important upcoming dates up again, just to go through that before we disappear. Not on there, but Miguel is going to be appearing on the Magic Story podcast on January 13th, which is going to then roll into the story beginning on January 14th. The story will then run right up into the debut on January 21st, which in turn will kick off preview season, running up through January 31st. After that, we will have the MTG Arena streamer event on February 2nd, followed by the pre-release on February 7th, and then Valentine's Day presents for everyone, Aetherdrift available everywhere that Magic is sold on February 14th. A couple other reminders for things coming up. The Arena Championship 7 is coming up soon. It's coming up on December 14th to 15th, so that's coming up this weekend. And then next week is Weekly MTG's last show of 2024, and it's a doozy, BNR stream. So we are going to talk about the BNR announcement. That's happening Monday next week. We will, as usual, come on Weekly MTG the following day to discuss. And it's going to be a doozy. It's going to be an interesting one. We're going to end the year with a bang. So please tune in next week for more on that. But until then, thanks for tuning in.